This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Hello, and thank you for being a part of Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein, a longtime journalist and a mom of 3, and this is where we take parenting challenges that we face every day, big and small, right to the experts for advice. And I'm actually having fun just thinking about this episode today because it is one of my all-time favorite things to do, and that is be and play outside, especially in the spring, summer, and the fall. Winter, usually need a little more motivation, but that's another story. Anyway, being outside and playing outside is more important for the development and the mental health of our kids than most of us probably realize. At least it was for me before speaking with our guest today. Ann Adams is with us in the studio. She is the leader of the Maine Early Childhood Outdoors Network. She is an early childhood professional specializing in play, working primarily with kids from birth to age 8. However, Ann's advice today is for kids of all ages as we learn how critical outside play can be for so many reasons, and some pro tips for getting our kids outside more often. Take a listen.
Ann, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Such an important one. And let's just start with, why do you feel so passionate about the idea of kids being outside and playing?
Oh gosh, well, kids in general are my passion, and have been for over 20 years. And I just feel really passionate about their well-being and the adults' role in giving them that well-being. Currently, we are facing a decline in play, and that has prompted me to really focus in on outdoor play and learning in the past 10 years or so. But overall, I've just been passionate about children in general for my whole life, almost, at least my whole professional career.
And you're a mom too.
I am a mom as well. Yes, I have a 5 and an 8-year-old.
Oh my goodness.
Both boys. Yep.
Whoa, you're busy. Yeah, I have a 5-year-old son at home and a almost 12-year-old and a 16-year-old daughter. But those 5-year-olds are super active.
Yep.
So let's just talk about outdoor play specific. Play is important. Obviously, we know that. But outdoor play specifically, what are the benefits of getting kids outside to play?
Sure. So the specifics to the benefits of outdoor play are similar to the benefits of all play, in that our brains, play is the children's primary language. And so it is how they make sense of the world. It is how the brain makes connections and grows. It is where things like problem solving and creativity and persistence and, all of that sort of develops in play. And so play is just a critical piece of a child's life. My specialty is in children under the age of 8. I'm an early childhood professional. So most of what I sort of focus on and talk about is during that early childhood period. But play is important for our whole life, basically. But outdoor specific benefits have to do with, one, just the decrease in stress and anxiety that the fresh air and the natural world can bring to us. And one reason that benefit is so important right now is because we are facing a little bit of a mental health crisis with young children, and we are seeing signs of increased stress, anxiety, depression. And so that outdoor piece, the fresh air piece, the being able to move freely, that is just a critical part of the play diet, right? Play can happen indoors or outdoors, but that fresh air and the access to the nature colors and sounds and all of that is what really decreases the stress and anxiety.
Sunshine.
Oh
my
right.
goodness.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also all of the elements. Children are, I'll talk about risky play in a moment, but children are drawn to elements in a way that we are not necessarily as adults.
And what do you mean elements?
Elements
specifically?
So water, dirt,
the actual
mud,
elements. Yeah.
fire. Yeah, like those actual earth elements, children are really drawn to in their play in particular. And so that's where you find most of that is outdoors, right? And so there's a real opportunity there for that to feed that desire of theirs to be in the elements. You'll notice, or at least I do in my job, that children they do not shy away from a rainy day. They do not shy away from a mud puddle. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They are drawn to it. And so it's our sort of twist on it that says, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. But children are really drawn to it. And so outdoors allows for that. And outdoors also, I mentioned risky play, but risk-taking, healthy risk-taking in child's play is a really important part of that play diet. And children are naturally drawn to you. If you have children, this may ring true for you. They are drawn to things like elevation and height. They are drawn to speed. They're drawn to the elements, which I just talked about. They're drawn to hiding or getting lost. And they're drawn to tools. They want to use adult tools. That's all risky play. Rough and tumble is another one, right? And all that serves a real important purpose to brain development.
When we talk about all these benefits, and obviously there is a very long list of the benefits, but are there benefits that you see for different ages? I know you focus on early childhood, but are there benefits specific to toddlers versus teenagers when it comes to outdoor play, or is it all kind of under the same umbrella, just different, developmental time?
I would say it's all under the same umbrella in terms of the benefits. But when you start to dig in a little bit deeper, then wherever a child is developmentally, you can sort of connect the outdoors to that piece of development. So, for example, children who are toddlers, for example, really want those freedom of movement of their body, right? The physical movement. And outdoors just allows for that so much more so sometimes than inside, where we're concerned about the couch or breaking something or climbing on the table, and so that's just an example of where outdoors can sort of match up. But the benefits are the same across the board.
You mentioned just the decline in outdoor play. And I will tell you, when I was researching this topic, I came across something from the National Recreation and Park Association. And there were a couple of things on this particular study that stood out to me. One was it found that Gen Z, which would be like 11-year-old to mid-20s, 26-year-old, are more likely than adults overall to not go outside during the day. And the same organization found that children today spend less time outdoors than any other generation, devoting only around 4 to 7 minutes of unobstructive outdoor play per day. And then on the flip side, they spend an average of 7.5 hours in front of some kind of electronic media. That makes my brain hurt. Mm-hmm. Is that what you were seeing and finding in your line of work? And why? I mean, is it all going back to the electronic devices? Like, why are we seeing that?
Yeah, we are seeing that for real. That this is a real issue. And I think that this is one thing that it's really important for parents to understand if you're raising children here now in 2024, is that the decline in outdoor play is a crisis that is been decades in the making. And it's actually much more than just the screens came and we stopped moving, or the screens came and we stopped going outside. It's been coming for 30 years, building on itself. And now we're dealing with sort of a systemic issue. And so it's really important to bring our awareness to that so that we can start to move in the right direction. And some of the examples are, so back in the fear factor, that began back in the 80s, where we became afraid that our children were going to be kidnapped or sexually abused. Or
that is literally what just came to my mind. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, don't talk to strangers.
Don't talk to strangers. Exactly. Yes. And all of that messaging, while it was intended wonderfully, it has sunk into parents in a way that the world is something that we need to protect our children from. And in fact, it's not more dangerous than it was 100 years ago. It's just that the messaging around that has created a mentality of fear that's contributing to that.
Well, we're much more aware of it too.
Much more aware.
Because of 24-hour news cycles, social media.
Yes.
So many years ago, you would see and hear all the different news blurbs.
Mm-hmm.
And now just to feed the cycle and,
Right.
you know, coming from somebody from news, like
Mm-hmm.
you see
it all.
it all.
Yeah. You do. And you can't help as a parent. You know, my Amber Alert goes off on my phone and I'm glad that there's action being taken for that. And as a parent, I say, oh, okay, where are my kids right now?
Where
right?
was this child?
Where was
what
this?
happened?
Right.
Could this happen to me?
Yeah, right, exactly.
So doing that mental check.
And that is something that's been building over time. And then on top of that, just after that, in the late 90s or early 2000s, we made a big switch in our educational system towards academics and standards-based education and direct instruction. And so for the past 2 decades, our public schools in America have been really heavily focused on academic achievement, direct instruction, and standardized assessments. And that's when we saw a decrease in recess, a decrease in play-based approaches, and just that. So play took another hit, right? So we've got this fear factor thing going on. Then we take a hit in the school system. And then in the in 2008, 2010, that's when media really takes hold, and now screens are everywhere. We take another hit, right? And finally, there's also, the economy is also contributing to this.
How so?
The sense that first, many families in America have 2 parents working, and that means that children are in programs for the most part, and our programs are highly structured. We want to look for programs that are play-based, that are offering really high-quality play experiences after school, as opposed to more structure or more programming. And also this idea that it's hard to succeed in this economy and that you need to have a resume of sorts. So this is where we saw an increase in homework, an increase in extracurricular activities, needing to be involved in 2 or 3 activities that are going to make you more competitive and more successful, right? That mentality that's just like, you know,
start them young
and get it in. And that's contributing to the overscheduling. And the overscheduling just takes time away from when we would be playing, usually, when a child would be free to make their own choices in activities. So
what, with all these barriers that come to mind, what can we do as parents to help encourage kids to go outside? And I say that knowing that it's not that easy all the time. I mean, it's, you know, just full disclosure, like it's much easier to convince my 5.5-year-old to go outside than it is my nearly 12-year-old to go outside and have that unobstructed time.
Yep. So I think of it and refer to it as a play diet that parents can start to think about as a first step. And so I think we all think about, or many of us really think about food and what are our children eating. And there's a lot of information around a well-balanced diet in that sense. And we can think about it in the same way. For a child, for all humans, but particularly for a child, play is a need just like food and sleep and shelter and love, right? Play is right up there in those top needs. So we can start to think about our child's play diet. And at first, you might just observe, what is your child's play diet? What is it like? What does it look like? Do they play indoors more? Do they play outdoors? How long are they playing for? That's, you know, I've asked some parents sometimes to just mark off, you know, how long are they actually playing for? I do that with teachers as well. Teachers have found that, you know, sometimes it's 20 minutes in a day, in a whole school day, that that child has choice in what they're doing, right? And so just think about the play diet in general, sort of, and are they getting outside? Are they having choice? Are they engaging in this imaginative, creative play that's really coming from them? It doesn't matter what they choose, as long as they're choosing it and that it's true play. So video games are not true play.
Well, that's also goes along, that's structured, right?
Yes.
Like it's guiding you through whatever levels or people or hardly an expert in video games, but you're not unstructured. There is a even though
there's a structure there, right? Exactly.
The unstructured quote unquote games they're still moving you through their maze.
The
system.
exactly,
Yeah.
right. And the benefits of play, when we're talking about the agency and responsibility and the sense of self and the problem solving, creativity, all those are the real benefits to brain development from play. And when we want those, we want children to be in charge of their play. So that means that whether the structure is coming from a video game or from an adult, that's not it, right?
Okay.
So if I'm telling them how to play, then it's not coming from within them. It's not intrinsic in that way. And so these are all just things to consider as you're watching your child play. Do they need you to play? Which is a common, children will come up to you, play with me,
Yes.
right? And parents will, whoo, I can't, right? It's
Right.
like, I'm going to be the princess again, right? Like, I don't think I could do this. So observe that in your child. Do they need help getting into play? Can they do it spontaneously? How much time are they getting to do that? And what materials are they able to use, right? Are they free-flowing materials so they can be creative?
It's important for them to have where they can entertain themselves with play.
Exactly.
Just as important, I would imagine, for parents to engage
Yes.
or a sibling or a friend. I want to talk a little bit more about unstructured play, whether frankly inside or outside, but particularly outside, just for the purpose here. I remember as a kid growing up, in the morning, you just get on a bike, find a friend who is also on a bike. You go to somebody's house, you go walk through the woods, you meet up with these friends, and you don't come home until a parent is calling for you.
Right.
I hope that's still happening for some kids. Just personally, my kids grew up more in the play date era.
Mhm.
It was much more intentional. We would set a time, okay, we're meeting so-and-so at a park at this time, or so-and-so is coming over to our house for a few hours. Parents are usually close by in some capacity. Then we had COVID mixed in with all of it. So in terms of the unstructured, why is the unstructured portion of play so important, and how we get back to
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
that?
Sure. So it's one reason why the outdoors is so great for this, because typically outdoors we have less stuff, as I'll call it, for children to play with, which could be toys, prescriptive toys in particular, right? So all of the toys that are only used for one thing, as opposed to what we call in my field loose parts, which are outdoors, sticks, rocks, sand, water, grass, hay, it can be anything. Also non-natural materials like planks of wood, tires, balls can be loose parts. There's
Right.
all kinds of things that can be
Loose
used.
parts. I
Loose
like that.
parts.
Okay,
And
I
so
like that.
they can
Yeah.
be put together, they can be taken apart, they can be manipulated in any way. And we find them more outside than inside. And so outside is a great place for children to find that type of play. It's also a great place for freedom of movement. So again, there's far less, aside from when we get triggered into that risk, the fear of risk, there's a less restriction on children's play when they're outdoors. So they can move freely, they can run, they can jump, they can roll, they can do all of that, right? And all those benefits you can find out there. And the benefit of us taking a step back also often happens outside, because we may not be out there with them, but we might be watching through the window, or we might be just close by, right? And that we give them the sense of sort of being on their own. Now, we haven't gotten to the part about how you get your kids outside yet, but
how do we get our kids outside? We can get to that. Yes.
Yeah. But once we have them out there, then that's those are the benefits to outdoor play, really. I also wanted you mentioned the historic scene of, tell your kids to go out.
Yeah,
they
just
have to be
go.
out.
Yeah.
And then, they come back whenever the day is over. And an element of that we have sort of gotten away from is boredom. And so boredom is really important for children. And this kind of play, the unstructured play that I'm talking about, requires a child to be bored for sometimes only a moment. We may not even notice, but then for their brain to work through that and come up with the thing that they feel driven to do, that they care about, that might give them joy. And if we offer them things to do all the time, their brain never does that work. And it's not to say that we don't ever offer them things to do. We certainly do. I invite my children to make banana bread with me, and I invite them to do all kinds of things. But, so this is when we go back to thinking about your child's play diet. Is there a balance? Are there moments where you're letting them be bored, have their own agency and choice, and not only have that, but force it a little bit, right? So when my child comes and says, well, one of my children doesn't really say this, but one of them really does. And they say, I'm bored. And he's 5 and he lays on the ground and he says, I'm bored, And for me, it's my favorite moment. And I say, I'm so excited.
Why?
Inside, because I know something really wonderful is going to come next if I can just let him move through it. My response is usually, I know what it feels like to be bored. Sometimes when I'm bored, I just sit still for a little bit. And, I'm just very, yep, I see that you're bored. I acknowledge it. I acknowledge their experience and say, yep, sometimes I'm bored too. I know you have a great mind. I know you'll come up with something, right? And then I move on and I get busy myself. And before I know it, I go back and check in a few minutes and he's just being incredibly creative and has come up with something to do. And for some children, that can take 30 minutes. For some children, it just takes a minute. But that's another thing that you can observe in your child. When they say they're bored, don't feed them entertainment. Just say, yeah.
What are you going to do about that?
What are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
In the most kind and gentle, don't we get annoyed real quickly.
Right.
We want that to just the whining to go away.
It's not a figure it out. I don't know.
Right. It's like, oh yeah, I
I
know what
getcha.
that's like. I get it. And then wait a little while. One, observe how long it takes them to move out of that. And 2, what do they do when they're done? And if it takes them a really long time, it may mean that there is a play deficit there, right? In schools, we see a lot of children struggling to play when they're given the opportunity because it is hard work. Their brain is not used to doing it over and over again. And often this happens with children who are in front of screens a lot, particularly at very young ages, because their brain really isn't given the chance to develop that skill of coming up with something to do, being creative, and feeding your own joy and all of that. That's so important to human development.
Well, and that's a life skill, whether you're 5 or 50.
Yes.
Frankly.
Exactly.
For my kids, when they're not feeling the whole outside play, I'll be like, 20 minutes. You got to go out for 20 minutes. Dinner will be ready then, and we'll go from there. And often 30, 40 minutes, an hour will pass. Not always, and they forgot about the time. So sometimes it's just getting them out the door, go. But that could be tough. So what strategies do you have?
Well, I think that your example is a great one. Right? There is an element of just, you know what? This is what we're doing right now.
20 minutes.
This is the bet, right? This is it. You got to do 20 minutes outside and really feeling good about that as a parent. So when they whine or they push back or they,
I don't feel like it.
I don't feel like it,
tired.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't second guess yourself. Yeah. Know that it's the same as why you put broccoli on their plate every night. Still, even when they don't eat it or they don't like it, right? We still put it out and we know that about food. We've all been, educated around that. Like, yep, those are things we need to do. And when you say sentences like you need to go outside for 20 minutes, pushing them into that a little bit, rest in the fact that you are doing the right thing, that you can feel confident in that, even when they're pushing back, and don't give in. Don't give in to that whining. And the one thing about the screen is that it's so easy. It's so easy for parents. I'm right there. It's the easiest thing. If I need my kids to, if I need to not think about them for a moment.
If you need to take a minute, there's no shame in that. So
not
just
at all.
guilt-free there. It's just that this should be
Yes.
incorporated in
Yes.
some capacity.
Yep. And when you have the strength or the, for me, it's strength to really say, no, there's no screens
Today.
on
Right.
Tuesday afternoons,
Yeah.
and that means that Tuesday afternoons you're outside, right? Whatever works for you. But, sort of setting a little bit of a pledge around like, nope, they're off for this and we're going outside.
So hard limits.
Hard limits. Yeah. And again, observe what happens, right? And celebrate the fact there are times that I send my children out and they come back in 15 minutes. I'm like, okay. And then there's other times I send them out or my children go out on their own now, but they don't come back for hours, so there's no, right or wrong or anything there. It's just a matter of getting them out and then letting them have that experience on their own.
What role do schools play in this? You talked a little bit about it, but I'm just curious what kind of questions that we should be asking or thinking about when it comes to schools. My 16-year-old, I don't know that she goes outside once during the entire school day. And she's got sports and things after school, thank goodness. But she'll go to school in the dead of winter. I'm like, does she need a coach? She's like, I'm not outside at all. Okay. What should we be thinking of as parents? Or is it we need to make up the outside time after school hours? Or should we be asking questions of this school and kind of keeping things in mind when it comes to the school day?
Sure. It's both. It takes a village to raise children. And so we all need to be doing better around outdoor play. We all need to be bringing it up in conversation more. We need to be thinking about it more. We need to be intentional about it. And we all have a part. So schools definitely have a part. And there are movements, certainly here in Maine where we are, but also across the country around outdoor learning, particularly since COVID. There's been an uptick of schools looking for ways to get their children outside more. However, it's a big lift. It's a big transition for them. Remember, they've been sort of 2 decades in a very highly structured, teacher-directed instructional process with students. Their schedules reflect that. Their environments reflect that. And so for them to transition out of it is a big ask. And while there are some school systems that are working on that, it's happening slowly because of that sort of systemic thing that's happening there with all of that. Some things that parents can do are to bring this up with your teachers and with administrators. So asking questions and finding out how much is my child outside during the school day? And what are they doing while they're outside? Right?
And that's for everything from early childhood, preschool age up to high school. Should high schoolers be outside?
Yes,
during
high schoolers should be outside too. We're seeing the highest rates of stress and anxiety in high schools.
That's true.
And this is one of the things that can combat that.
And it doesn't take resources. It doesn't take money.
It doesn't. I mean, exercise and fresh air do a lot for our psyche and our bodies. And if we have a population of adolescents who are really struggling, this is one thing that we can do. And so, yes, asking high school teachers and administrators as well. Also because oftentimes they're all a part of the same district. And so just getting the conversation started with teachers and administrators across the whole district is really important. One, just asking the questions. How much is my child going outside? And also, what are they doing out there? So is it feeling like it is a high quality play environment, which is what I was just sort of talking about in terms of it's unstructured and there's materials that they can use. So unfortunately, many of our playgrounds have a wood chip bottom and they have a climbing structure. That climbing structure never moves. It's always the same thing. And there aren't other materials to use. And so there's not a lot for children to do during the typical recess on the typical playground. So the play is not always productive. It's usually highly social when you watch the play, which has its benefits, but it's not so much object play. We don't get that engineering and problem solving going in their play when they're on recess, they're on the yard during recess usually. And so it's just something to ask about What are the types of play that they're seeing? And if they can't answer, then there's a piece of information, right? Just starting a dialogue. I remember a time when I was just last year, my son was 7, he was in the 1st grade, and he came home from school and said, I was wrestling on the play yard today and I had to walk laps as a result, right? And, my heart sank, right? Because I am who I am. And I know that rough and tumble play is something that is healthy for a 7 or 8-year-old
Right. And so
boy.
the message he got was that it was a bad thing.
It was a
my
bad
goodness.
thing.
Yeah.
And not only that, but he was made to do something pretty unproductive and sort of shameful around like that play
You
outdoors,
must have,
right?
been dying inside.
Yeah. And so first I had to have the conversation with him around balancing, yes, the school has a rule. I know that you need that. I know you were doing it with your best friend and it was all good, but we can't do it at school. So how else, just problem solving with him around that. And then I went to the principal and my husband and I sat down with him. And the thing is that our messaging with teachers and with administrators just comes across a lot better when we are calm and not blaming and well-informed. And so we just very calmly said, hey, this is what happened. And this is how we see it. We see this type of play as really beneficial. And we see also a play yard where they can't really do anything else, right? They had a few balls, but they got kicked over the fence and they're not retrieved. So what else are they going to do, right? And
And here they were trying to, and I get the school's perspective too, because you don't want anybody to get hurt.
No.
They were entertaining themselves
Exactly.
in a friendly
way.
Mm-hmm. So,
and we maintained, we said, we're not looking for you to change the rule. We appreciate that wrestling is not something that you would do on the play yard, and that's a rule of school. And yet, what are you doing to allow for some other types of play out there so that this doesn't happen? One more thing I'll say about just paying really close attention to what schools are doing is that fresh air and outdoor play and play in general should not ever be used as a consequence. So withholding fresh air or withholding outdoor play, such as keeping kids in from recess.
If they don't finish an assignment or
exactly.
they were talking too much in class.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
And that's a practice that has become fairly norm across our country. And that's something that you can start to bring to the fore if you know that that's happening. And certainly if your child is letting you know, I would really listen to that, because play is a need, like I said, just like food and fresh air, all of that. And so we don't want to withhold that from children. And I think that our schools are better than that. I think given that they can be a little bit more creative and think about a consequence that might fit a little bit better and not withhold something that is so necessary as fresh air and outdoor play.
You bring up so many good points. For parents, if there was one thing we can do today, one key takeaway when it comes to outdoor play, we're going to do this right now to get started. What would that be? Because there are so many good things that we should be doing right now.
I think for starters, becoming aware that there is a serious decline in outdoor play and that it's having significant impacts on our children. Just really knowing that that is there, that it's not something that is, sort of myth or frivolous, something that is just like, oh, they should play more, right? It's serious. We have a mental health crisis for our youth, and the decline in play, specifically outdoor play, is a part of that. It can also be a part of the solution. So first, just become aware of that. Start talking about it. Talk about it with fellow parents. Talk about it with your school administrators. Talk about it in your neighborhood, because you may come up with solutions. For example, there are some neighborhoods that have found solutions to this, where they have designated one parent to be sort of on while children play freely across the neighborhood. And they take turns in doing that. And it allows for children to move about and bike in the road. And the parent is not overly involved, but they are, being around and being on call. So that's just an example of a creative solution.
Aware, and other parents can kind of unplug a little bit.
Yeah,
they know somebody's on call.
Right. And
so
it was just, that's an example of one thing that emerged from conversation. So if we start talking about this with fellow parents, we may come up with some creative solutions that really work for us. So be aware of it, talk about it. And then lastly, I would say is just observe your own child's play diet. Really pay attention to it. watch what they're doing. Are they getting enough play? And what types of play are they getting? And if it's not enough or they're struggling to get into play, then start to just do some thinking around how might you help them engage in more play.
Anne, this is amazing. Thank you so much for the conversation. Really appreciate you being here. And I want to mention too, for any of our listeners, we'll have more resources on our website about the importance of play and different ideas. That will be wgme.com/raisingme. And thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So, what's your play diet? What is your child's play diet? I love the idea of thinking of play, particularly outdoor play, as an important overall part of our health. And like Anne said, we need it. We all do, no matter your age, like food and sleep. So let's ask ourselves, is my child getting enough outdoor play for their mental and physical health? And what about the idea that she talked about, how unstructured play helps your brain learn to combat boredom? And if, say, it takes a long time for your kids to snap out of boredom and find something to do, would there be a play deficit there? Like, that was eye-opening. I get resistance sometimes at my house. I know a lot of us do, but this is something I'm sticking to, making it a rule, no bending on. Outside you go. You'll survive. Keep going. Anyway, thinking back, I sometimes hear my parents saying, go play outside. It's a nice day. And in hindsight, I am so glad they did. I'm sure I gave them plenty of eye rolls in the meantime, but I still almost feel guilty. And even it hurts a little bit if I can't be outside and it's a nice day. So I hope it's my voice that helps my children develop a love for being outdoors, for their mental and their physical health for a lifetime. Thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield and produced with Nate Eldridge. Please follow Raising Me wherever you get your podcasts. And if this helped you in any way, please leave a positive rating and review, which helps others find the message as well. Wherever you are, I hope you learned something new and get to take a little time for you.